For emblem rings, I show a slightly different set of information. I can't show everything. I'll link to a great site, Triangle Attack, that does have all the info in the description. I show the skills with different levels of the skill shown in different colors, and I also show the stat bonuses for equipping the ring and the engage attack. Marth is the first emblem ring you get, as the first lord in the series. He's a good introduction to the mechanic. Emblem rings give a certain set of sync skills whenever equipped to a unit, along with a generous boost to their stats. When engaged, units get access to a powerful engage skill, a pool of weapons, and a powerful single-use engage attack. Marth is a relatively simple emblem, built around primary combat. His stat spread is incredible, and Divine Speed gives his partner even more damage on top of doubling. I think many people don't realize how much of a Lear's early game competence comes from Marth. He can turn basically any physical unit into a monster in the first third of the game. When equipped to a dragon, the extra hit from Divine Speed will heal, which is nice but certainly not the best dragon synergy in Engage. As you raise his bond rank, you get access to a few more skills that aren't anything to write home about. He has inheritable skills built around dodge tanking, but that's generally not viable in the early game. His engage attack, Lodestar Rush, is a single target, big attack. Like other emblem attacks, it can't miss, can't crit, and doesn't let the opponent counter. An important mechanic is that the engage attack isn't locked to Marth's swords. They make sure anyone can use the engage attack, but if you are in a sword-wielding class, you can bring your own weapon for it as long as you could wield that weapon normally. Marth's weapons are phenomenal, and they're typical of emblem weapons in a couple ways. First, emblem weapons often have effectiveness, which triples weapon might. This makes sure they're never totally outclassed by normal weaponry, even late in the game. Marth has the rapier, as per tradition, and the falchion at level 15. Second, the best engage weapons are absurdly powerful. The time limit on engaging let the designers go crazy, and boy did they. Marth introduces us to this power with Mercurius at bond rank 10. This sword boasts 12 might and doubles experience gain. Awakening gave Robin 50% extra XP, and they're one of the best units in the series' history. So it suffices to say doubled XP is bonkers. If you optimize Mercurius, timing the boost so you can score a ton of kills and or defeat a boss with it before time's up, it lets you break the level curve early on. Allocating that bounty is one of the most important decisions you can make on any given early game map. Marth is available at the start and then the end of the game. In the late game, one-range swords are no longer sufficient for good enemy phase combat, and it becomes more situational. The stats and engage attack are always great, but there are better emblems by then. He can make a unit a viable dodge tank, but that's not that valuable as a niche on Mananing. Early on, he's a powerful experience factory with Mercurius that can make any physical combat unit a carry. Engage is all about scarce resources. Marth's partnership is the first thing our units all desperately want, but that only one of them can have at a time. Sigurd starts the trend of emblems that bend the rules. Where Marth's kit basically gave a unit a huge buff to combat, Sigurd lets you do things that you can't replicate with stats. His primary sync skill, Canter, lets a unit move 2 spaces after their action. It's hard to overstate how good Canter is, and luckily for us, it's inheritable. Canter is the best inheritable skill by a mile. Units that can get this early have a serious advantage in the mid-game from mobility alone. Sigurd isn't just Canter. His engage skill, Gallop, is movement plus 5, which is as good as it sounds. He gains a sync skill, Momentum, which lets units convert that big movement into big damage on player phase. Movement's always great, but in Engage it shines more than you might think. Engage's movement tools are surprisingly limited. If you want to do something that requires moving a unit 1 tile more than normal before Chapter 15, you have 2 options, a tightly controlled supply of staves like Warp and Sigurd. There's no universal access to Shove, no Warp spell that recharges per map, no Stride, and no Pair Up. That's one of the biggest reasons Canter is so good. It's essentially impossible to replace the extra movement, even if you're only using it to go forward faster. His engage attack, Override, attacks through a line of enemies with a sword or lance. The dopamine hit from this is incredible. The designers did unfortunately remember you had this tool when designing maps. Next chapter, an Override is handed to us on a silver platter, and a few other early game maps have setups for a juicy one, but you won't find 10 enemies in a line waiting to get lanced going forward. The one time you will is Sigurd's Paralog, where you can't. Nice one, Intelligent Systems. It is nonetheless possible to manipulate many enemies into a formation where Override is effective. With Momentum's boost, the Rider's Bane or a strong smash weapon can sometimes get those awesome one-shots, but it's not common. A single lance hit can only do so much. Rest assured, I will leave no stone unturned looking for awesome overrides, and there's some fun ones to look forward to. Sigurd doesn't really get much better than he is at the start. His engage weapons are fine, but compared to the other emblems, they're nothing to write home about. As the game goes on, powerful mixed enemy groups make it much harder to Leroy Jenkins into enemy lines and survive. He also suffers from his own success. On an optimal team, everyone who wants Sigurd inherits Cantor, so it's as if he doesn't have a primary sync skill. Sigurd's stat spread is great for strong, durable units in the early game. He'll let a unit like Alfred or Louis get to the action, hit enemies, and use a big override to either take a lot of kills or weaken foes for others. As the game progresses, simply winning in combat becomes harder, and Sigurd doesn't really help you do that. You may very well end up giving him to your dancer later on, when your primary combatants have better options. Despite that lackluster finish, Sigurd is one of the emblems that would be the hardest to play completely without. We will definitely appreciate him. Celica is the first magic-oriented emblem, although Marth and Sigurd aren't terrible on magic users who can use the Levin Sword. Resonance and her magic bonus make magical offense much more powerful in the early game. She gets good bonuses with mystical units for even more damage. She also boosts strength, so she's tailor-made for sailing in the early game. Celica is not quite as straightforwardly great as Marth or Sigurd. She lacks the generally applicable skills they do. Holy Stance is awful, and while Favorite Food is a great skill, it's not great on Celica. There are much better targets for one of your packed meals. We'll have to dive a little deeper to unlock her potential. In the early game, the key to maximizing Celica is Warp Ragnarok. This lets you warp across the map and attack with a 15 might tome. On mystical units with 4 movement, this is a huge boost to your army's mobility, and because it warps, it can bypass walls or terrain. Much like Override, the game sets up a few great places to use it in the next few maps. Even without planning those out, having a huge magical nuke that can't miss and can't be counterattacked is quite helpful for boss kills. In the late game, Ragnarok's 15 might is no longer good enough to offset the fact that Warp Ragnarok doesn't double, and you'll struggle to find one-hit kills or places you can warp safely. Luckily for Celica, the late game features tons of corrupted enemies, and so Seraphim becomes incredible. It's one of the better weapons to upgrade with your limited crystals. There are a few easier ways to hit the late game benchmarks. Throughout the game, Echo should be something you remember to use when you can. These separate echoes trigger chain attacks twice, letting you reach a kill threshold you may not have before. It can also let a unit clean up 2 foes at once, which nicely complements engage attacks that weaken a large area. As most attacks that say they deal a fixed percentage of your total damage, Echo doesn't activate skills like Divinely Inspiring twice. It's only part of the base damage calculation. Celica is always good, as all emblems are. She only feels as good as Sigurd or Marth when you can really make the most of Warp Ragnarok, and as that becomes harder, she'll feel more and more like Seraphim with extra steps. We'll have a lot of fun using Celica, but I think in an average casual run, she's one of the tamer emblems. Our first emblem, Marth, plays by the rules. He's basically a big stat buff and a cool double XP sword. Sigurd and Celica bend the rules through their movement tech, but they're still confined by the limited offense and durability of your units. Micaiah is different. She breaks the game. Micaiah's engage skill, Augment, gives staff range +5 and area of effect +1. Our humble men's staff goes from healing a single unit beside you to healing 5 units in a cross formation from up to 5 squares away. Our men's staff is now better than any healing staff in most games. When you start with a staff that is already amazing, like Warp, you get the best staves in Fire Emblem history. This is already busted, but wait, there's more! You might wonder if Augment works as a single use for durability and experience purposes. The answer is that it's the best of both worlds. If you use Mend on 5 units, you get XP and SP as if you spent 5 turns healing each unit individually, but your Mend staff only uses 1 use. If 5 units isn't enough for you, Her Engage attack, Great Sacrifice, heals every damaged allied unit, giving you experience credit as if you used a heal staff on each one. The 100 XP cap on what a single action can give you, meaningless for any normal combat, is actually a problem for Micaiah. That's a good problem to have. You don't even need staff rank, because her Sing skill Cleric lets you equip level C staves, scaling up to A throughout the game. Yunaka, our thief, will become the best healer in the series for this map. Remember, this is all in the early game, using staves so bad you can buy them in the earliest shops. If you want to beat the game as easily as possible, the solution to every map in the late game is to use a warp, rewarp, or rescue with 5 units and 10 range to teleport an entire squad to the boss. On some of the brutal late game maps, even if you aren't trying to get low turn counts, you often find that it's the easiest way to avoid getting swarmed by endless reinforcements. Augment's great with every staff, of course. A 5-tile obstruct can help isolate enemy groups, and plenty of enemy formations can be crushed with a 5-tile status staff. Micaiah can solve almost any problem you face in Engage. Micaiah's inheritable skills, stats, and weapons are fine. Great Sacrifice brings the user to 1 HP and can't be used again until you gain some HP back, so Healing Light helps you plan around that. Nosferatu would be absurd as a tome you could equip permanently and use for tanking, but for 3 turns at a time on an emblem that can break the game without combat, it's not as good as it sounds. It says a lot that a tome that can easily make a unit more or less invincible while engaged is barely worth mentioning on Micaiah. Micaiah lets an underleveled unit heal your other allies multiple times per turn, and gain experience that doesn't depend on enemy strength. You can use Mend on 3 or 4 units, repeat, use Great Sacrifice, recharge on an energy tile, and then do that all again, doing dozens of heals in 7 turns. On some maps, literally feeding the Micaiah user every single kill would do less. Micaiah doesn't require any combat. Your other units can get all of that XP for themselves, charging in with reckless abandon and relying on Great Sacrifice to save them. Micaiah dominates the early game by letting you train up whoever you want with minimal planning, and freeing up the rest of your army to do combat all over the place. She then dominates the late game by being a vital safety valve to trivialize almost any map. One of the overarching goals for this playthrough is to avoid fully breaking the game with Micaiah. I'll be showcasing that experience factory, because it will let me train up far more units than I ought to have the room for, but I'll avoid using Micaiah to snowball any single unit into an unstoppable juggernaut. I'm also committing to, with one early exception, playing every map straight up, without major skips. Even when I'm intentionally mismanaging her talents, Micaiah will still be one of the best emblems. On either side of this playthrough, if you're playing more casually and Chapter 25 wouldn't be fun without Warp, or if you're instead trying to beat it in one turn with an optimized setup, Micaiah's the best emblem in the game, and it's not close. With Roy, it feels like the designers were inspired by his Smash incarnation. He's all about trading blows up close and personal. His Engage skill, Rise Above, is a cool idea. Instead of giving you a fixed stat buff, it gives you temporary auto levels based on your growths. Combined with his great strength bonus, it's surprisingly common for those extra points to reach a kill threshold and materially affect combat. There's no other emblem that gives his stat combination, most importantly his strength, and many great units want exactly what Roy provides. His Sync skill, Hold Out, ensures survival above a certain HP threshold. For impulsive players like me, this is quite fun. You don't have to carefully calculate damage for a lot more enemy phases. It's also fantastic in optimized skill builds when combined with the likes of Vantage, but it's in some sense the least important part of most of those builds. There are other ways to get a unit to low HP. Roy's Engage attack, although relatively weak, fits him. It does damage in an area in front of the user and sets the area on fire. It's most useful on the front lines. The flames can weaken foes and hamper enemy reinforcements. You probably won't get it to one-shot anything, because a single sword hit tends to hurt about as much as a pool noodle, but as an opening attack to soften foes and split them up before your back line can come in, it works well. It seems like Roy helps you do everything a great Fire Emblem unit needs to do. When enemies try to kill you, don't die, and kill them back. There's a catch though. You need 1-2 range to actually counterattack many foes. A sword user who wants to use Roy's Engage attack and effective weapons often can't put his resistance in bulk to enough use on enemy phase. That changes at bond level 15. The Binding Blade, on top of a massive +5 boost to defense and resistance, has 1-2 range and 14 might. With this blade equipped, Roy's whole kit comes together. You can go deep into enemy lines, take a dozen hits, and do huge damage in a turn. Everything I've said about magic being better in enemy phase doesn't really apply once you get the Binding Blade, and unlike mages, you don't need any support to tank damage. Roy is quite different in the early and late game. In the early game, he's useful for baiting enemies and doing enemy phase combat before you have other better tools for that job. In the late game, the Binding Blade can give you a classic GBA Fire Emblem experience. A dominant unit with 1-2 range and fantastic stats who wipes out half the map on enemy phase. Leif's like the sommelier from John Wick. He's all about weapons. Just as second seals give you a reason to obtain weapon proficiencies, Leif gives you 6. He's important in the metagame just for allowing flexible reclassing, even if that doesn't help his ring bearer. On the battlefield, he's all about enemy phase. If you remember Anna's analysis, I discussed how enemy phase combat has a couple mechanical disadvantages. Enemies can break you, you can't rely on using different weapons against different foes, and it's hard to have enough bulk to avoid getting whittled down. Leif addresses these drawbacks. Adaptable removes the restriction of only using a single weapon. Vantage means you can attack first, hopefully avoiding damage entirely. If you can't manage that, Armed Shield gives you extra bulk if you're playing the Leif strengths and toggling between different weapons is necessary. He gives bulk and build, making units better able to survive damage and toggle between different weapons without getting weighed down. That package sounds amazing. Leif removes the limiting factor on how many rounds of combat you can see in a turn. If you have a great unit who just can't fight everyone quickly enough, Leif makes them a one-person army. You might notice an issue though. Our limiting factor on combat isn't being broken, it's enemy stats. Leif suffers more in maddening than any other emblem. Besides that build, hopefully letting you double, he gives 0 offense of any kind. Even with Marth, hitting physical benchmarks is hard. Without any boosts, it's downright brutal. Someone like Diamant might be able to tank 4 enemies no problem, but if you're just doing chip damage back, I'd rather be fighting them with someone else. Once enemies promote and come at you in mixed formations, tanking 4 of them is also by no means guaranteed. Leif's kit is also frustrating. He works better in theory than in practice. Let's cover the quirks of his abilities. Adaptable doesn't let you switch weapons, it lets the AI pick weapons for you. His algorithm is consistent, but the game doesn't explain it. That's where I come in. He prioritizes in order, being able to counter, weapon triangle advantage, bonus damage, stats, and higher inventory position. That's not a bad ordering, but it doesn't always do what you want unless you're intentional about limiting your inventory. I don't want to be too much of a downer. You get to switch weapons on enemy phase. That's altering a core mechanic of the entire series, and it's fantastic when used in the right situation. It also gives several stat bonuses as synergies. I'll mention Avoid plus 20 for covert units as a fun option. The real tragedy is Leif's engage weapons. You'd think with the crazy stuff they've handed out so far, an emblem all about weapons would get something game-breaking, right? If only. The Killer Axe is, well, an unforged Killer Axe with 1 less weight. The Master Lance was absolutely gutted from Leif's game, and famously ruins a lot of enemy phase setups at Engage. It's usually easier to use Leif when you intentionally avoid unlocking it, so Leif never picks it for you, which feels bad. In a game polished with Mirror Sheen, it really sticks out as confusing design. The light brand is also pretty infuriating. It's a magical sword, so the game will pick it to counter axes, even if the wielder does terrible damage with it. We already have 11 sword, and we can use that without also picking the Master Lance against sword users. I think it's fair to feel quite let down by Leif on maddening. With his weapons, adaptable can often be worse than nothing, and doing chip damage is just not that valuable. Don't worry, there is a bright side. Let's talk about what Leif can do on the hardest difficulty. His engage attack, Quadruple Hit, has a high ceiling. It's truly 4 individual hits, unlike something like Lodestar Rush, which does a percentage of damage. With a strong user or damage modifiers, it's one of the best engage attacks for killing bosses. If you apply Draconic Hex and Divinely Inspiring, both very standard parts of any boss kill, that's plus 28 damage. Even if the light brand hit does little from the Lakes of Amber, it's still useful for the true damage added. You might find that the strong, mobile units you want doing those boss kills work surprisingly well with the rest of Leif's kit. With high enough strength, effective weapons can threaten one-shots on a lot of enemies. Normally their high weight makes them unwieldy, but Leif fixes that. Take a unit like Louis or Amber, give them a carefully curated set of weapons, and they can often get a few kills in enemy phase against a specific enemy group that would have been tough to engage otherwise. You could use a poleaxe against a lance cavalier, switch to an armor slayer against an axe armor, and then activate Vantage to one-shot a mage with a tomahawk all in one turn. Even if you aren't sitting in preps plotting out exact kills, having a unit who can reliably chip several enemies at once is certainly useful. 10 damage from a javelin hit doesn't sound great, but it's not like you can inherit magic plus 10. Your citrine may need that to get her L-Surge kill without being counterattacked. Leif does also have one of the single best builds in the game. Maybe I should have led with that. I haven't talked about Vantage much. For most units, it's not very useful. You only get one hit from Vantage before the opponent gets to attack, even if you double, so it's often merely a moral victory, wounding your killer before they finish the job. If you can defeat your opponent before they get to attack though, that's essentially invincibility. The key to reaching that power is stacking crit. Leif gives plus 10 crit to backup units, and because of adaptable, you can use a killer axe and bow together. It's essentially adding 30 or more crit over a hand axe. Altogether, the right unit in Warrior can get close enough to 100 crit you can rely on it. Most excitingly, this is the first time his weapons don't hold him back. Just don't unlock the Master Lance and he'll always pick your good forged killer axe over his unforged one. There's a future unit, Pinette, who's basically perfect for this. She joins in the same chapter as an emblem who gives a skill boosting crit at low HP, and her personal skill adds 10 crit when damaged. She has some of the game's best HP and strength, and just enough dex you probably won't miss. As long as you avoid any generals who can tank even a crit and the RNG plays nice, you can wipe out a dozen enemies in a single turn without getting hit a single time. Foe walks up, gets crit for 60 damage, dies, in comes the next victim. Leif's one of the hardest emblems to sum up. He doesn't give you anything for free, and he demands that you plan around his weaknesses and frustrations to even make sure he doesn't actively get a unit killed. No emblem has a worse floor. As an auxiliary emblem, helping your main fighters, focusing on quadruple hit and adaptable as a way to tailor effective damage to specific mixed groups, he's mechanically deep and fun to plan for without necessarily offering you great returns for that effort. If you pair him with Pinette or a few units who can do a good Pinette cosplay and build around Vantage, you get a bona fide enemy face sweeper who doesn't take any highly contested emblems. What should you make of all that? I suppose that's for you to decide. The Three Houses bracelet is the only DLC emblem that you don't need to play a difficult Divine Paralog map for, and they're arguably the best of them all. Almost like they're motivating you to play Tiki's Paralog by dangling more emblems like this one. Also, this doesn't fit anywhere else, but I think the way this bracelet translates effects from Three Houses into a very different engine is brilliant. Tons of fun references for that large fanbase. Their bonuses fill a valuable niche in the metagame. They're one of the only great strength boosting emblems. Fast physical units like Physical Alir and Chloe love the boosts, and slow units like Louis can also make use of them by just giving up on doubling. Instead of focusing on enemy phase combat with that defense boost, the bonuses push you towards player phase in an interesting way. Every turn, a random house leader takes point. The active leader determines which of 3 gambits the units can use. Edelgard's attacks and light squares on fire, Dimitri's nullifies the first range attack each attacker makes an enemy phase, and Claude's attacks and poisons foes around the target square. The highlight here, without any doubt, is Dimitri's shield gambit, which you can use to bait enemies. It's hard to plan around these, of course, but worth thinking about when you have the option. You won't see the different gambits in this series often, but that's just a limitation of highly choreographing my runs. I need to be able to rehearse, and coming up with contingencies for which leader I have is way beyond me. They're quite useful if you're able to plan on the fly. The house leader in front is also important for weapon sync. When using a weapon type that matches the emblem on player phase, Edelgard has axes, Dimitri lances, Claude bows. This gives a +5 and then +7 boost to might. While engaged, the bonus is unconditional. Random player phase boosts, as we'll discuss in a moment, aren't the foundation of an easy Maddening run. Nonetheless, the guaranteed boost while engaged is amazing. You can use the combat arts each leader had in their game tied to their engage weapon, because weapon durability isn't a thing in engage. Instead of spending weapon uses, you spend engage meter turns. Raging Storm lets you move again after attacking with Amir. The price is 3 engage turns instead of just 1. Amir is a heavy smash weapon with awful hit, which does put a damper on things, but a second action is absurdly strong. It's hard to argue there's a better use for your hit crystals. Isn't it insane that Emir had no such limitation in 3 houses and Raging Storm could be used more than once? Atrocity uses Aridfar, which already has plus 50% might on player phase. Atrocity doubles that might. Think of it as being effective against everything. It's useful for one-rounding powerful enemies with high defenses, and it can double unlike its 3 houses counterpart. Fallen Star uses Failnod, a fantastic 2-3 range bow, and makes the user unable to be hit during the next round of combat on enemy phase. It can be used to bait dangerous enemies, or just use Failnod before bond level 15. The engage meter depletion isn't always bad. You can only use energy tiles or favorite food when you fully exhaust the engage meter, so sometimes it helps you route that out. You always need to spend 1 turn not engaged, but if you realize you want to recharge, you can often Raging Storm just to exhaust the meter. The engage attack houses Unite, strikes with all 3 weapons at 50% power. Unlike Lodestar Rush's 7 times 30% damage, the rounding here is much more favorable, so it's often also a 150% multiplier on damage boosts like Divinely Inspiring. Lineage is the only thing I haven't covered. It's worse than it sounds, because it essentially means units just plateau half a level higher. It isn't enough to counteract the reduced XP from gaining a level. When inherited on a training project, it can help units catch up quickly, but on your 3 houses user it's barely noticeable. Putting all this together, what do we get? The 3 houses bracelet gives great physical stat boosts, but lacks enemy phase skills, speed, or 1-2 range options. That means the ceiling of 3 houses isn't quite as high as the very best emblems, who turn your great units into world-beating juggernauts. Instead, the 3 houses bracelet carries any physical unit to a solid baseline of player phase competence. If you take a unit who's fast or strong but not both, like Physical Clan or Etier, as a Wyvern or a Warrior with 3 houses, it'll be a mobile powerhouse. Consider giving them to a unit you want to deploy who would otherwise struggle to earn their roster spot. They're great on the best units too, don't get me wrong, but they aren't multiplying the effectiveness of your elite fighters as much as the other emblems. They'll do the most for your team when taking a unit from bad to good. In that context, they're super fun and mechanically interesting. I'm going to be quite happy to deploy them more in the future. Tiki's probably the emblem players disagree on the most. There'll be a few hot takes coming up. Her Engage skill, Draconic Form, gives plus 5 to basic stats and plus 10 to HP. That's incredible, blowing every other emblem's buffs out of the water. It's the sort of boost that can turn zeros into heroes. Her primary sync skill, Star Sphere, gives you an incentive to do that instead of boosting your best unit, like Marth has in Mercurius. It gives 15% extra growth while leveling. While Tiki's beside them, even middling units have the game's best growths. You can easily imagine Tiki snowballing. Draconic Form lets you train even a total scrub, Star Sphere gives them extra permanent stats, you get even more kills, and you're off to the races. Light Sphere means you aren't reliant on healers, and Light Sphere exists. Alas, it's not quite that simple. There's a catch to Draconic Form, unlike other emblems which gives you a set of engage weapons on top of your normal kit. While a dragon, you're only allowed to use 3 of her weapons. Eternal Claws comparable to a Killer Lance plus 3. Tail Smash is a smash weapon similar to a Steel Great Lance. Finally, each battle style has a single breath attack, which have enemy defense and resistance and have an area effect, but have the downsides of smash weapons. They never double and attack last. All 3 are great weapons in the early game, but you can't forge them the way you can an actual Steel Great Lance. You also lack any equivalent to a Javelin, even with all the stats in the world. For an enemy at 2 range, you're doing 0 damage. Melee range simply won't cut it in Engage's late game. You can't be a great enemy phase unit if many enemies take 0 damage. I think it's also easy to forget just how powerful the late game synergies locked behind Paralogs maps are. Even in raw stats, Tiki gets serious competition. A Roy user wielding the Binding Blade with 1-2 range gets level plus 5, buffs to HP strength and resistance, defense resistance plus 5 from the weapon, and 4 extra might over Eternal Claw. Luckily for her, Tiki is not just about combat like Roy. Let's talk about her support skills. Her Engage attack, Divine Blessing, gives an ally a Revival Stone. Enemy bosses aren't the only ones cheating death any longer. I've talked up Divinely Inspiring a lot for being a buff you can stack on top of a unit's existing emblems and skills. It shouldn't shock you then that Divine Blessing is amazing. It makes your best unit better without any opportunity cost. You can just add it on top of anything. Unlike Override or Warp Ragnarok, which have game-breaking potential that's carefully designed around, Tiki gets some DLC privilege with her Engage attack. And solve problems, you get the sense we're not built with it in mind. Like with many of the best Emblem skills, I won't maximize it in the interest of avoiding monotony, but if you're playing in a less egalitarian style and don't mind a little cheese, giving a Revival Stone to your super unit can be incredible. Geosphere is Tiki's best skill. I'm not sure that's a popular opinion, but hear me out. Geosphere gives Tiki and her neighbors +3, then +5 defense and resistance at the start of a turn. Because it's unselfish, it stacks with other emblems and boosts. Sharing really is caring, because it won't activate without an ally receiving the buff. Binding Blade Roy is much better than Tiki, but Geosphere plus Binding Blade Roy is better than Binding Blade Roy. Unlike other stats, Bulk's a win condition if you get enough of it. Geosphere lets a unit with 1-2 range pull off the long enemy phases Tiki herself can only do when enemies lack ranged weapons. In the early game, Tiki's a lot like Marth or Micaiah, a training boost you often give to projects. Unlike boosted XP gains, Starsphere stats are permanent. You can then transfer the Starsphere boosts to a better mainline combat emblem and free up Tiki for other roles. She can do support with Divine Blessing and Geosphere, or do combat in a small niche. Some units like Diamant can still do great combat with Tiki later in the game, but that's normally a side project while other units actually beat the map. Tiki's lots of fun, but I think there's two big misconceptions that can get in the way. First is the idea that Tiki's unfair pay to win. In my book, she's one of the weaker emblems, and certainly much weaker than the likes of Micaiah or Roy. If you're using Tiki instead of spamming Bondage Shield with a mage, you're making the game harder on yourself and not easier. Second, people sometimes think that optimal play entails maximizing Starsphere, inheriting it on every unit, or tying themselves in knots to route XP. Some people might cringe at me giving John 6 levels in Tiki's Paralog. That could have been 0.9 points in every stat. Starsphere is good, but it's not game-breaking. A couple points across the board won't do as much as several points in the key stats, and many of the best strategies in Engage succeed precisely because they don't rely on raw numbers. I'd think of Starsphere as a fun way to play favorites with a unit or two who Tiki works well with, not as a reason to painfully feed a level 1 Jean 6 levels of combat experience. If you enjoy those kinds of training arcs, though, have at it. You'd be training Jean far more honestly than I did using Micaiah. Ultimately, I'd advise you to just play freely with Tiki. If you enjoy training units through combat instead of staff span, Tiki's your gal. If you enjoy building super units, early Starsphere combined with Divine Blessing and Geosphere support after switching to a different emblem lets anyone become a superstar. If you want to see funny proc skills activate, Tiki's super fun with Diamant or Chimera as a low-risk way to roll the dice. Like most other DLC emblems, Tiki isn't some integral part of the meta. You don't need her for anything. That means she's a free agent for whatever goals you have besides simply beating the game. And if you approach her with that mindset, you'll be in for a treat. Veronica's from Fire Emblem Heroes. She's an outlier among the emblems. Her bonuses seem incoherent at first, but from the right perspective she makes perfect sense. She's also perhaps the most mechanically complicated emblem in the game. Get some popcorn, because this will be a hefty analysis. Part of Veronica's kit feels made for dominant enemy phase mages. Her stat bonuses are middling, but the magic's nice. She has two incredibly fun weapons that complement your standard tomes without simply having effective damage. Her first engage weapon, Leif Skjalf, prevents enemy counterattacks. Vagar disables enemy buffs. I can't tell you about every edge case, but as a general rule, if a buff shows up in the details menu under a basic stat, Vagar disables it. Both have situations they shine, especially against the toughest enemies, exactly when you'd want an engage weapon to be useful. Leif Skjalf's also important as simply a strong tome lookalike level 1 weapon. Units like Yunaka really appreciate having a magic option their class doesn't normally offer. Her true calling card is Reprisal. Missing HP becomes an attack buff. Reprisal is the single best damage boost in Engage. There are skills with easier activations or more potential damage, but none that rival Reprisal's combination of flexibility and power. Compare Magic plus 5. All you need to lose is 17 HP or 10 with Reprisal plus, and you're getting the same benefit, plus added strength. Units have a lot more than 10 HP. If you try, you can easily see Reprisal act as magic and strength plus 15. Missing 30 HP isn't nothing, of course, but there are workarounds: Bondage Shield, Vantage, Holdout, Stacking Bulk, etc. Veronica has other bonuses that instead suggest she's a support emblem. Her Engage attack, Summon Hero, summons a random unit with a random rank: 3-star unpromoted units, 4-star promoted units, and 5-star emblems. The summon disappears when your Engage meter runs out, and any kills they get don't give you XP. They can't trade or be traded with. You can't just take their weapons and sell them. Summon Hero is the sort of thing you can spend hundreds of hours using and never really take the time to figure out. I would know, because this series was the catalyst for me to finally do my homework on it. The chances for 3, 4, and 5-star pulls are 30%, 40%, and 30% respectively. Unlike heroes, you will actually see 5-star emblems fairly often. Dragon units have the 3-star chance folded into the 4-star chance, so you always get at least a promoted unit. Doing combat advances the RNG this uses, so if you're willing to spend a couple of rewinds, there's a good chance you can get an emblem. There's a few other random outcomes you might want to roll for. Pulling a backup unit for chain attacks, or a mounted unit that could cover more distance. If you want to mount, pit blue. Lance units have the Royal Knight without an equivalent in other weapon types, so it's the best for pulling mounts. If you want a backup, pick red or green. Both swords and axes have the same chances. Colorless means thieves, mages, and healers. Notably, you can pull units who don't have any weapons, so make sure to account for that possibility. Having chain guards or poison can be great, however. Summon Hero is an awesome translation of gacha mechanics into Fire Emblem, at least if my nightmares of rolling for Amber every playthrough are any indication. It's fun because all that RNG trivia isn't actually too relevant. If you're reliant on specific Veronica pulls, you have no one to blame but yourself for uncooperative RNG. Instead, you normally use her ability the way you use disposable units in other Fire Emblem games, baiting scary enemy formations, extending your movement range, blocking off enemies, etc. You're expecting a warm body and get Sigurd, that feels great. But it's not like you're expecting Sigurd and then getting frustrated the way you might when a unit misses an 85. There's some cool stuff you can do with Summon Hero, and I'll try to show that in the series, but it often replaces a more interesting solution to a problem you're facing. Like Divine Blessing, there are parts of the game that aren't well balanced around having cannon fodder, and definitely parts not balanced around pulling Marth out of a hat. I'll often use it just for XP and bond rank. Her Engage skill, Contract, is a great value dance. It lets a unit act again, but with 0 movement. You might think this would loop indefinitely with a Dancer, but they thought of that. Contracted units can't dance. Because of how emblems work, trading the Veronica user's action for someone else's can often do a lot more than you'd think. An extra turn of Micaiah or an extra attack in Draconic form are far better than an average turn. I find Contract most useful for boss kills. It lets one unit you've tailored to a specific boss threshold take out 2 health bars instead of 1. As another support tool, her Staff Fortify Plus gives AoE healing and status removal. It has the same XP formula as if you use a Micaiah augmented heal with a 7-tile radius. Like other Engage staves, it's powerful in part because its durability regenerates with the Engage meter. While I won't focus on it, there are certainly ways you can use this to break the level curve. So half of Veronica sets you up for dominant enemy phase combat, and half offers support utility without using your own stats at all. Which half should you play to? The answer lies in our next few skills, which give us a clearer picture. First, Book of Worlds. Every consecutive turn you wait, you stack different bonuses onto your next attack. The most useful effect is the first, freezing the next foe targeted. You can combine this with Lead Scalp to contain powerful enemies without letting them hit you. There are precious few ways to replace that utility in Engage. The second bonus sets the attack space on fire, which is situationally useful in places where there's a terrain bonus like fog you can remove, or if you're chipping a boss. For more casual runs where units don't always have something to do, Book of Worlds is a nice consolation prize for idling. I wouldn't aim for units sitting around twiddling their thumbs half the map. The effects aren't that good. Level Boost does the opposite of Book of Worlds. It rewards killing higher level foes by giving you a bit of Royce bonus. That higher level condition is interesting. It can't snowball you ahead of the enemies you're facing. Another difference from Roy's effect is that you can't easily see what it'll give you, but if you're dedicated, you can plan around it to reach benchmarks more easily. SP conversion is the final piece of the puzzle. It gives 20 SP per kill. This isn't great for egalitarian playthroughs at a fast pace, but if you're willing to grind reinforcements, you can get incredible SP totals from them. As it happens, Veronica has a fabulous reward for your efforts. Reprisal Plus costs an eye-watering 6,000 SP. That's 300 kills with SP conversion. Unwieldy, yes, but doable, especially with books and normal SP game. What's the unifying thread of all these eclectic bonuses? Veronica is not an emblem for weak units, or an emblem for primary combatants. She is the emblem for turning weak units into primary combatants. She's all about rags to riches, zero to hero. If she had LinkedIn, she'd post non-stop about the grind set, hitting the gym at 5 AM, and how the 3-star unit she summoned that got wrecked by a boss needed to just work harder. I think that metaphor got away from me, but the point stands. Veronica brilliantly translates into Engage the kind of dopamine-driven gameplay Fire Emblem Heroes embodies. Let's say you give Veronica to your favorite character. To make this hypothetical more fun, let's say Clan. Even if he's badly underleveled and would evaporate on contact with an enemy, Veronica gives him options. Lead Scalp, besides continuing the proud legacy of Fire Emblem weapons that would end a spelling bee, gives him kills even if his foe would kill on the counterattack. Fortify Plus is like a knockoff Great Sacrifice. It won't scale into the late game, but for low-level units it gives huge XP. Summon Hero, free XP, and clan stats literally do not matter. Book of Worlds rewards the slow, methodical play you'd expect from trying to feed one unit a bunch of kills. Level Boost gives you extra stats to get those kills after the first couple in any given map. Then, as Clan becomes more capable, you get SP Conversion. Even if XP plateaus or you're fighting skirmish enemies and Void Curse reinforcements, you get something for every foe you defeat. After a lot of work, the sweet payoff comes. I didn't mention that Elevagr is an 18 might tome. Clan don't like that. Then he unlocks Reprisal Plus, a skill so good it costs 6000 SP. Thanks to SP Conversion, you can inherit the best skills in the game to pair with it, or take Reprisal Plus itself and pair it with a different ring. Your sweet pickle-loving steward is now a walk-in nuclear weapon. Is high investment Veronica optimal? No, not even close. As with Tiki, don't feel obligated to go all out. In terms of effort, there are far easier ways to dominate. There's more to engage, however, than what takes the least effort. Veronica can be the emblem you build your entire run around, but she can also be a fun side project you pursue while using more meta-shaping emblems to actually beat the game. Summon Hero and Contract are just rock-solid Fire Emblem mechanics any team can enjoy. For your trouble, eventually you'll get a unit with Reprisal Plus that can definitely shine, and that's gratifying, even if it isn't necessary. If I can be frank, I was pretty skeptical an emblem from Fire Emblem Heroes could work in Engage. It feels like bringing a kazoo to a symphony. I'm quite happy to have been proven wrong, and I'm glad we'll get a lot of time to work with Veronica. Many DLC emblems are oddballs, and Camilla fits that bill. There's something for everyone, but it's not immediately clear how her kit coalesces into a game plan. She gives HP, speed, and resistance, with mixed engage weaponry. The Bolt Axe, a magic axe without the Hurricane Axe's limitations, and Lightning, a brave tome, are both fantastic. Camilla's axe, an axe that is Camilla's and has niche bonuses against enemy mages, is handy even if it's not some huge prize for bot level 15. Her engage skill, Soar, lets a unit cosplay as a flyer, complete with extra movement. It's surprisingly useful. You fly over terrain more often than you stay in the air. Soar gives a unit 90% of flight's benefits with none of its limitations. Her engage attack, Dark Inferno, uses axes and hits in a 5x5 checkerboard pattern, setting flames on the targeted squares afterwards. Axes have high might, so even Dark Inferno's single hit can pack a punch, and with two axes as engage weapons, anyone can hit on defense or resistance as needed. The checkerboard pattern is unusual, so you get the same dopamine hit overrides have when you manage to one-shot a crowd of enemies. Like Corrin in the base game, Camilla has her own Dragon Veins, spawnable terrain effects for each battle style. That's one of the reasons she's joining the team early. There's a lot of room for creativity and preparation when you can modify terrain, and that's what this run is all about. There's no real standout option the way Corrin has with covert units, but there's neat stuff for each of them to do. Her other skills are, let's be generous and say, niche. Decisive Strike adds 5 and then 10 damage to player phase crits. It's situational because if you crit, any base damage increase gets tripled. Plus 5 damage is worse than plus 2 attack. You'll probably forget about Detoxify before you ever get a chance to use it in any way that matters. Groundswell makes Dragon Veins better on ground units, but it's nothing to get excited over. So what's the pitch for Camilla, and who should use her? Because her effects depend so much on the user's battle style, she feels quite different depending on her user. You can think of Camilla as a support emblem, focusing on terrain modification and Soar over offense. Dragon Allure gets their choice of Dragon Vein, Soar to achieve objectives like recruiting Jade faster, and a neat Savage Blow reference. Chi Adepts get the Ice Tiles from Tiki's Paralog, and as I've noted, you have very few options for increasing movement and engage. None of those units are going to do much damage with Camilla's weapons, note the lack of any strength or magic in her stat bonuses, but if they help your best combatants do their job, that's okay. You can also look at Camilla as a way to cheat the class system. Generic flying classes have many limitations in Engage. They're missing out on tomes, knives, high-rank staves, bows, and all the different battle-style bonuses. You can pair Camilla with a bow user like Ulchrist to intercept enemy flyers in the air, or a thief like Yunaka to use terrain boosts normally out of reach. Decisive Strike also makes sense for weaker crit-happy units like Ulchrist and Yunaka. The Covert Dragon Vein is quite good as a debuff for bosses. Other infantry styles also have their advantages. It's easy to think of situations where flying Brave Assist chain attacks or flying armored units could be helpful, and their Dragon Veins are good for support. The juiciest previously forbidden combo Camilla unlocks is Tomes and Flight. Griffin Knight's magic is significantly weaker than true magic classes, so even though Camilla doesn't boost damage directly, it's still often easier to hit benchmarks by giving a Mage Knight wings than by stacking magic on a Sword Griffin. Her engage weapons also fit wonderfully with mages. The Bolt Axe outdamages early tomes, Lightning will always have a niche against low-res enemies like armors, and Camilla's axe is great for mages fighting other mages. The water and flames from cavalry and mystical dragon veins aren't ideal, so you're sacrificing some utility, but there's a reason Malignite didn't make a return. Magic and flight are a powerful pair. Even the less useful dragon veins have their niche, like Blazing Lion, often hampering enemy movement helps you divide and conquer. The last style, Flying, has more synergy with Camilla than you'd think. It feels wasteful to have Soar on a unit who doesn't need wings, but you get an extra 2 movement as compensation. Her stat bonuses and engage attack make a lot more sense on a Wyvern or Griffin than they do on most units. You're patching up the main weaknesses of Wyvern or doubling down on Griffin's strengths. You can more easily set up Dark Infernos, and sometimes 10 movements is better than anything else she can do. If you're expecting Conquest Camilla, a dominant combat unit with incredible skills, Emblem Camilla's poor stat bonuses and lackluster sync skills will disappoint. She instead echoes Birthright and Revelation, terrain manipulation like on this map, interest in unit builds you can't otherwise get, and a lot of mechanical depth that isn't actually important for beating the game. Her most notable boons, Dragon Vein and Soar, both come at level 1. She isn't an emblem you necessarily staple to a single unit through the game. I think she's probably the tamest emblem in Engage in terms of raw power, but she offers irreplaceable tools. She'll shine on a run like this one.